The human ship broke through the colored clouds of planet Vex, its engines humming quietly as it approached the massive crystal palace that served as the center of the stellar empire. Commander Jack Thompson stood at the view screen, his back straight and his uniform perfectly pressed. This was humanity's first official diplomatic mission to the Vex homeworld. And Jack knew everything hinged on making a good impression. "Approaching landing zone," said his pilot Tom. "The Vex have sent landing coordinates." Jack nodded. "Take us in slow. Remember everyone, we represent all of Earth today." The small team of 5 humans felt the ship touch down with a gentle bump. Outside, lines of tall, blue-skinned guards stood at attention. Their bodies were slender but powerful, with small ridges running along their foreheads and down their necks. "Breathable atmosphere confirmed," said Lisa, the team's scientist. "Gravity is 0.9 of Earth's. You'll feel slightly lighter." As the door opened with a hiss, Jack led his team down the ramp. The air smelled sweet, like cinnamon and something else he couldn't name. A Vex official stepped forward, her skin a deeper blue than the guards, with gold patterns that seemed to shift as she moved. "Commander Thompson," she said in perfect English, "I am Minister K. Welcome to the Stellar Empire. Queen Lyra awaits you in the Grand Hall." Jack bowed slightly. "We are honored by your welcome." The walk through the Crystal Palace left the humans speechless. Huge windows showed the 3 moons of Vex hanging in the pink sky. The halls were filled with strange plants that moved as if alive and artwork that seemed to change as they passed. Minister K stopped at a massive door made of something that looked like blue metal. "The Queen sees few outsiders. You must not speak unless spoken to. Do not make sudden movements. And most importantly, do not stare at Her Majesty's crown. It is considered deeply offensive." The doors swung open silently, revealing a room bigger than any Jack had ever seen. At the far end, sitting on a throne that seemed carved from a single giant crystal, was Queen Lyra. Jack felt his breath catch. The Queen was nothing like he expected. While the other Vex were blue, she was a shimmering purple, her skin catching light like the surface of water. 6 small horns formed a natural crown on her head. Her eyes were large, completely black, and fixed directly on Jack. "The human delegation," announced Minister K, led by Commander Jack Thompson of Earth. Jack stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, we bring greetings from Earth. We hope this marks the beginning of friendship between our worlds." Queen Lyra's voice filled the room, though she spoke softly. "Rise, human. Your kind has been watched by our scouts for many years. Only now do we find you worthy of formal contact." Jack straightened, careful not to meet her eyes directly as they had been advised. "We are honored by your assessment, Your Majesty." "Are you?" The Queen stood in one fluid motion. She was tall, nearly 7 feet, and moved with strange grace as she descended the steps toward Jack. "Many species find our standards difficult." Jack remained still as she circled him. He could feel her studying him, the hair on his arms standing up from some energy that seemed to radiate from her body. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. A smile tugged at Jack's lips before he could stop it. "Humans often surprise others with what we can accomplish despite our size, Your Majesty." The Queen stopped in front of him, head tilted. For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a sound like small bells. "I see why the Council selected you, Commander Thompson. You have what we call spark in your species." She turned to Minister K. "Prepare the grand reception tonight. Our guests will join us for the welcoming feast." As the Queen returned to her throne, Jack caught her looking back at him with curious interest. Something passed between them in that moment. A connection he couldn't explain but definitely felt. "The Queen rarely hosts feasts for new species," whispered Minister K as they were led out. "Consider yourselves fortunate." Jack nodded, but his mind was already racing with questions about the mysterious Queen and the strange feeling that this mission was about to become much more complicated than anyone had prepared him for. 2 Earth months had passed since the first meeting, and Jack found himself spending more time in the Crystal Palace than on the human ship. The Queen had named him the official human ambassador, giving him private quarters in the east wing of the palace. Today, Jack walked with Minister K through the royal gardens, a place few outsiders were allowed to see. Strange plants with moving tendrils reached for them as they passed, only to retreat when Kay waved her hand. "The Queen has requested your presence in the science chamber," Kay said, her tone carefully neutral. "This is unusual." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Is there a problem?" "No," Kay said quickly. "But the science chamber holds many Vex secrets. No other species has been invited there before." They turned down a hallway Jack had never seen, passing through security checks where tall guards scanned them with handheld devices. Finally, they'd reached a door that seemed to be made of liquid metal. "I will leave you here," Kay said. "The Queen waits inside." Jack stepped through the door and found himself in a vast room filled with equipment he couldn't begin to understand. Tubes of glowing liquid connected to machines that hummed with power. In the center stood Queen Lyra, watching a large screen showing what looked like moving cells. "Commander," she said without turning, "join me." Jack moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain the proper distance that Vex protocol demanded. "You wanted to see me, Your Majesty." "Yes." She touched the screen, and it changed to show what Jack recognized as DNA strands. "Do you understand what you're looking at?" "DNA, genetic material," Jack answered. "Very good. This is Vex DNA." She swiped again, and a different strand appeared. "And this is human DNA, from the samples your science officer provided." Jack studied the images. They looked different, yet similar in key ways. The Queen's voice had lost some of its formality. "Jack, what I'm about to tell you is not known outside our highest circles. The Vex are dying." Jack turned to look at her, surprised by both the information and her use of his first name. "Dying? Your civilization seems to be thriving." "Our civilization, yes. Our species, no." Lyra's black eyes reflected the screen's light. "For the past 300 years, our birth rates have declined. We are compatible with almost no other species in the galaxy. Without new genetic material, the Vex will be extinct within 5 generations." Jack felt the weight of her words. "I'm sorry. Is there anything Earth can do to help?" Lyra turned to face him fully. Standing this close, Jack noticed fine lines around her eyes that spoke of worry. "Perhaps. Human DNA shows remarkable adaptability. Your species can breed with no other known species, yet your genetic structure has qualities we've never seen before." A Vex scientist entered, bowed deeply, and handed Lyra a tablet before quickly leaving. She studied it, then looked at Jack with a new intensity. "You possess something no other species we've encountered has. Your cells adapt and change in ways ours cannot." She took a step closer. "I've been watching you, Jack Thompson. You've learned our language in weeks when it takes most species years. You've adjusted to our gravity, our food, our customs with remarkable speed." Jack felt suddenly warm under her gaze. "Humans are good at adapting. It's how we survived on Earth." "It's more than that." She touched a control, and the room darkened except for the screens. "In private, I must ask you something important. Would your people consider a deeper alliance with the Vex?" "What kind of alliance?" Jack asked, sensing they had moved beyond normal diplomacy. "A biological one." Lyra's voice was softer now. "My scientists believe humans might be compatible with Vex in ways we never thought possible." Jack swallowed hard, suddenly understanding where this conversation was heading. "You're talking about reproduction between our species." "The Council would never approve testing such a theory," she said, moving closer still. "They fear outside influence. But as Queen, I have certain freedoms." The air between them seemed to crackle with tension. Jack knew this moment could change the course of both their species forever. "If we're discovered," he began. "We won't be," she said, her hand almost touching his. "At least, not until we know if it's possible." Jack looked into her alien eyes and saw something familiar there. Hope, mixed with something else he hadn't expected to find so far from Earth. Desire. The moons of Vex cast 3 different colored shadows across the private royal chambers. Jack checked the corridor before slipping through the hidden door that connected his ambassador quarters to the Queen's private wing. These secret meetings had become their routine over the past weeks. Queen Lyra waited by the large window overlooking the capital city, her purple skin glowing softly in the moonlight. She wore simple clothes, not the royal garments she displayed in public. "You're late," she said, but there was no anger in her voice. High Counselor Rex wanted to discuss Earth's mining protocols. Again, Jack moved beside her at the window. "I think he suspects something." Lyra turned to him with a small smile. "Rex suspects everyone of everything. It's why he's head of security." When she reached for his hand, Jack still marveled at how naturally their different anatomies fit together. Her skin was cooler than a human's, but warmed at his touch. "The scientists say our species cannot reproduce," Lyra said quietly, leading him away from the window. "They've tested compatibility with 100 different species. None have succeeded." Jack followed her to the sitting area where strange fruits and drinks waited. "Yet you don't seem convinced." "Humans were not part of those tests." She poured a blue liquid into 2 glasses. "Your species defies normal classification. You adapt to environments that would kill others. You survive diseases that destroy entire planets. Your bodies change to match your needs." Jack took the drink, having grown accustomed to its sweet, burning taste. "We're stubborn that way." "It's more than stubbornness." Lyra sat beside him, closer than Vex protocol would ever allow in public. "I've studied your planet's history. Your people mixed with others of your kind throughout your development. Different groups that evolved separately came together again." "That's true," Jack said, noticing how her eyes reflected the room's light differently than human eyes would. "Earth has a long history of different human groups meeting and creating new combinations," she finished. "Always adapting, always changing. No other species does this so easily." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. These private meetings had started as discussions about their worlds, sharing stories and histories, but over time, they had developed into something neither had planned. "My council meeting was difficult today," Lyra said suddenly. "They fear Earth's influence. Rex wants to limit human presence on Vex. Is that why there were fewer human visitors allowed this week?" She nodded. "Rex believes humans will try to colonize our worlds. He doesn't understand that's not your way." "Not anymore," Jack admitted. "We learned from our mistakes." "I tried to explain that." Lyra's hand tightened on his. "But Rex has supporters. Many Vex fear change." "And you don't?" Jack asked. Her black eyes met his. "I fear extinction more." The room seemed to grow warmer as Lyra moved closer. Their first kiss weeks ago had been an experiment, a test of physical compatibility. Now it was something they both craved. "The royal bloodline must continue," she whispered. "For thousands of years, Vex queens have chosen mates from the highest families. But those bloodlines are failing now. Our children are born weak, many die young." Jack brushed his fingers along the small ridges on her neck. Something he'd learned brought her pleasure. "And you believe humans might offer a solution." "I believe you might," she corrected. "You, Jack Thompson, with your impossible adaptability." Later, as they lay together in the strange, soft bed that adjusted to their bodies, Jack stared at the ceiling where tiny lights mimicked the stars outside. "If your scientists are wrong," he said quietly, "and if we actually could have a child together, what would happen?" Lyra traced patterns on his chest with her cool fingers. "It would change everything. Some would see it as salvation, others as contamination of the royal line." "That sounds dangerous." "Very dangerous," she agreed, "but also necessary. My people need hope." Jack pulled her closer, feeling the strange rhythm of her two hearts against his chest. What about us? Is this just about saving your species? In the dim light, he saw something vulnerable in her alien face. It started that way, she admitted. But now, I find myself thinking of you even when questions of reproduction are far from my mind. The confession hung between them, more intimate than their physical connection. I have to return to Earth next week, Jack said. Just for meetings. I'll be gone for a month. Lyra nodded against his shoulder. When you return, we'll know if anything has changed. Neither spoke what they were both thinking, that they had already crossed a line from which there was no easy return. Jack's ship docked at the main Vex spaceport after its month-long journey back from Earth. Something seemed wrong immediately. Instead of the usual honor guard that met him as the human ambassador, only a single Vex official waited at the landing pad. Commander Thompson, the official said with a stiff bow. I am to escort you directly to the palace. What's happening? Jack asked, feeling uneasy as they boarded a fast transport. Where's Minister K? The official kept his eyes forward. The palace will explain everything. They flew over the capital city, and Jack noticed unusual activity. Large crowds gathered in public squares, and the normally orderly Vex seemed agitated. Military vessels patrolled the sky in formation. When they reached the palace, the usual calm efficiency had been replaced by chaos. Guards ran through hallways. Officials huddled in corners, speaking in urgent whispers. No one would meet Jack's eyes. A familiar figure hurried toward him. Minister K looked tired, her normally perfect appearance disheveled. Thank the stars you've returned, she said, gripping his arm and pulling him quickly down a corridor. The Queen has been asking for you for days. What's going on? Jack demanded, stopping in his tracks. The city is in chaos. Kay looked around before speaking in a hushed voice. The Queen made an announcement 3 days ago. The High Council is in emergency session. Some members are calling for her removal. Jack felt cold fear spread through his body. What announcement? Before Kay could answer, 6 royal guards surrounded them. The Queen demands the humans' presence immediately, their leader said. Jack was escorted to the throne room, but instead of the formal space where diplomatic meetings were held, he was taken to a side door that led to the smaller council chamber. Inside, raised voices echoed off crystal walls. Queen Lyra sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by angry council members. She appeared calm, but Jack could see tension in her posture. When she spotted him, visible relief washed over her face. Ambassador Thompson has returned, she announced, and the room fell silent as every Vex turned to stare at him. One Vex rose to his feet, his blue skin dark with anger. Jack recognized High Counselor Rex. This is the one, Rex asked, his voice dripping with disgust. This human is responsible. Responsible for what? Jack asked, looking at Lyra. The Queen stood, her regal bearing silencing the room once more. Leave us, she commanded. All of you, I will speak with the human alone. Your Majesty, Rex protested. The Council demands. The Council demands nothing from their Queen, Lyra snapped, power radiating from her. Out. Now. Reluctantly, the Council members filed out, Rex being the last to leave with a venomous glare at Jack. When they were alone, Lyra's composure cracked slightly. She walked to him quickly. You returned just in time, she said. Events have moved faster than I expected. Lyra, what's happening? Jack asked, forgetting protocol entirely. The city is on edge. The Council is furious, and no one will tell me why. She took his hands in hers, her touch cooler than he remembered. 3 days ago, I began feeling strange. The royal physicians examined me and found something impossible. Jack's heart began to race. What did they find? Life, Jack. New life. Her black eyes searched his face. I'm carrying a child. Our child. The room seemed to spin around him. The scientists said it was impossible. They were wrong. A smile touched her lips. Human adaptability, it seems, extends to reproduction in ways no one imagined. And you announced this? Jack asked, struggling to keep up. I had to. The royal physicians would have reported it regardless. She squeezed his hands. I stood before the council and said, "You got me pregnant, human." Their faces. For a moment, she almost laughed. "This isn't funny," Jack said, panic rising. "Rex looked ready to kill me. He would if he could." Lyra's face grew serious again. Half the council sees this as salvation for our species. The other half sees it as contamination of the royal bloodline. What does this mean for us? For the baby. Lyra placed one of his hands against her abdomen. It means everything changes. The old laws say any who gives the queen a child has claim to royal standing. But no law anticipated the child being half human. From outside the room, they could hear the growing sounds of argument. "Your timing is fortunate," Lyra said. "Tomorrow I address the entire empire. They need to see you standing beside me when I explain that this child represents hope, not disgrace." Jack nodded slowly, still processing. "And Earth. They'll need to know." "Yes." Lyra's face hardened with determination. "The galaxy will know that humans and Vex have found a way forward together, whether they approve or not." The Royal Laboratory hummed with activity as Vex scientists moved between workstations with urgent purpose. Jack sat on an examination table, watching as a medical drone took another sample of his blood. This was the 5th test today. Dr. Locks, the chief royal scientist, studied the results with widening eyes. "Remarkable," he muttered. "Simply remarkable." Queen Lyra stood nearby, her hand resting protectively over her abdomen. Though barely noticeable to others, Jack could see the small swell beginning to form. "Explain it to us again," Lyra commanded, "in terms the ambassador can understand." Dr. Locks projected a hologram showing 2 DNA strands twisting together, one purple, one blue. "Human DNA contains unique adaptive properties we've never seen before," he explained, pointing to the blue strand. "When human genetic material encounters Vex reproductive cells, it doesn't reject them as incompatible like all other species we've tested. Instead, it changes." "Changes how?" Jack asked. "It reshapes itself to become compatible." Dr. Locke sounded both disturbed and amazed. "It's as if human DNA rewrites portions of its own code to match with Vex genetic patterns." Lyra moved closer to the hologram. "And the child? Healthy? Strong?" Dr. Locke shifted the display to show a small developing form. "The embryo shows characteristics of both species, but its cellular structure is more robust than pure Vex offspring. It appears to have inherited human adaptability." Jack stared at the image of his unborn child, a strange mix of human and alien features already visible. "Is it a boy or girl?" Dr. Locks looked confused. "It will be female. Of course. All Vex royalty are female." Before Jack could ask more questions, the laboratory door slid open. Minister Kay rushed in, her face tight with worry. "Your Majesty, there's been an incident at the North Gate. An explosive device." Lyra straightened immediately. "Casualties. 3 guards injured. The perpetrators escaped, but they left this." Kay handed over a small crystal tablet. Lyra's face darkened as she read it. "The Pure Vex movement claims responsibility. They say this is just a warning. They demand the human leaves our world. And..." She paused. "The abomination be terminated." Jack stood up. "They're calling our child an abomination." "It was expected," Lyra said grimly. "The traditionalists have always been vocal about keeping Vex bloodlines pure." Dr. Locks cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, there's something else you should know." He lowered his voice. "The tests show that human physiology has unexpected properties. The ambassador's body produces cells that can rapidly adapt to different environments, including Vex weapons." "What does that mean?" Jack asked. "It means," Lyra said slowly, that you may be more resistant to Vex weapons than anyone realized. The stun beams that would paralyze a Vex might only slow a human. A loud alarm suddenly blared through the laboratory. Red lights flashed along the walls. "Palace security breach," Kay shouted over the noise. "We need to move the Queen to safety." Guards burst through the door, weapons drawn. "Your Majesty, intruders have bypassed the main security gate. We believe they're heading for the royal quarters." Lyra turned to Jack, her face resolute. "They're coming for us." "The secure bunker," Kay suggested, "through the lower halls." As they hurried from the laboratory, Jack heard shouts and the distinctive sound of Vex energy weapons discharging somewhere in the distance. The guards formed a protective circle around Lyra as they moved through hidden corridors Jack had never seen before. "Who are these pure Vex people?" Jack asked as they descended a spiral staircase. "Extremists," Kay explained. "They believe mixing with other species will destroy Vex culture. They've always been a fringe group, but this pregnancy has given them new support." A loud explosion rocked the stairwell, sending dust raining down from above. "They're following us," one guard reported. "Somehow they know the royal escape routes." "Betrayal," Lyra said, her voice cold. "Someone on the council has helped them." They reached a heavy door at the bottom of the stairs. As the guards worked to unlock it, another explosion, much closer, shook the walls. 3 masked attackers appeared at the top of the stairwell, weapons raised. "The Queen," one shouted. "Kill the human." Energy beams shot down the stairwell. Guards returned fire as Jack pulled Lyra behind him. A beam hit his shoulder, burning through his uniform. It hurt badly, but he remained standing, just as Dr. Locke had predicted. "Get through the door," Jack told Lyra, picking up a fallen guard's weapon. "I'll hold them back." Lyra's eyes widened. "Jack, no. The baby is what matters now," he said firmly. "Our child changes everything for both our worlds. You have to survive." The door finally opened, revealing a secure chamber beyond. "I'm not leaving without you," Lyra insisted, pulling him toward the door as the guards provided covering fire. Together, they stumbled into the bunker as the heavy door sealed behind them, shutting out the sounds of battle. 3 days in the royal bunker felt like 3 years. Jack paced the small space while Lyra communicated with loyal forces through secure channels. The news from outside was grim. "Half the capital is in open revolt," she said, looking up from a communication screen. "The Pure Vex movement has gained more supporters than we thought possible." Jack sat beside her, wincing as he adjusted the bandage on his shoulder. "And the council?" "Divided. Rex leads those who oppose us. He claims I've betrayed our species." Her hand moved to her growing belly. "But Minister K has rallied many to our side. The younger Vex especially support us." A soft chime announced an incoming message. Lyra touched the screen, and a human face appeared. Captain Rogers of the Earth Defense Force. "Commander Thompson," Rogers nodded. "Good to see you alive, sir." "Captain," Jack responded. "What's your status?" "We've entered the Vex system with 3 battle cruisers. The Earth Council authorized intervention after receiving your emergency signal." Rogers looked grim. "The Vex fleet is also divided. Some ships are demanding we leave. Others are offering to escort us to the surface." Lyra leaned forward. "Captain, I am Queen Lyra. You have my permission to land at coordinates I'm sending now. These lead to a loyal military base outside the capital." As they ended the transmission, Jack turned to Lyra. "Earth is risking war to protect me." "Not just you," Lyra corrected. "What's happening here affects both our worlds now." A side door opened, and Dr. Locke entered, carrying medical equipment. "Your Majesty, I need to perform another scan." Lyra lay back on a medical couch as the doctor passed a scanning device over her abdomen. A holographic image appeared above her, their child, growing rapidly. "Fascinating," Dr. Locke muttered. "The fetus is developing faster than a pure Vex would. And look at these readings." He pointed to data streams Jack couldn't understand. The hybrid DNA is stabilizing in ways I never thought possible. Is that good? Jack asked. It's revolutionary, Dr. Locke said with genuine awe. This child might possess strengths from both species, human adaptability with Vex psychic sensitivity, if we can study the process. Lyra sat up suddenly. You mean this could help other species? Potentially, yes. Dr. Locke seemed excited despite the danger around them. Many species in our galaxy face reproductive decline. If humans can provide genetic adaptability to the Vex, they might help others too. Jack stared at the doctor. You're saying humans could be, what? Universal donors. That's exactly what I'm saying. Dr. Locke displayed new data. Your DNA shows markers that could potentially adapt to multiple species, not just Vex. Humanity could be the key to saving several dying races. The bunker door slid open as Minister K rushed in. Earth ships have landed. Captain Rogers is bringing forces to secure the palace. She paused, noticing their expressions. What did I miss? A revelation, Lyra said, standing with new purpose. One that changes our strategy entirely. Within hours, the bunker became a command center. Loyal Vex forces reported in alongside human officers. Jack found himself naturally taking command of the joint operations, his military training reasserting itself. Rex's forces control the main government buildings, he explained to the gathered officers, pointing to a holographic map. But they're isolated from the general population. A human lieutenant raised her hand. Sir, what exactly are we fighting for here? Our orders were just to extract you safely. Jack looked at Lyra, who nodded her permission. We're fighting for more than just the Queen or myself, Jack said. The child the Queen carries represents a scientific breakthrough that could affect dozens of species across the galaxy. Dr. Locke stepped forward. Human genetic material has unique properties that might save species facing extinction. The Queen's pregnancy proves what many thought impossible, that humans can help rejuvenate failing genetic lines. The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. So Rex isn't just opposing one hybrid child, a Vex commander said slowly. He's fighting against a future where Vex might survive through human help. Precisely, Lyra confirmed. And not just Vex. Many species who have watched their numbers dwindle could find hope in what we've discovered. Jack moved to stand beside Lyra, aware of the symbolic importance of their united front. This isn't just about one human and one Vex Queen anymore, he told the room. This is about showing the galaxy a new path forward. Together, a human officer spoke up. The pure Vex call this contamination. How do we convince others it's salvation? Lyra's answer was immediate. We show them our child when she's born. Living proof that our species can not only coexist but create something stronger together. Jack looked around the room, seeing determination replace confusion on both human and Vex faces. Tomorrow, he said firmly, we retake the palace. The crystal palace gleamed in the morning light, looking peaceful despite the battle scars that marked its walls. 6 months had passed since the conflict that locals now called the Unity War. Jack stood at the window of the Royal Medical Chamber, watching 3 different colored moons slowly fade as daylight grew stronger. Behind him, Lyra's breathing quickened. She lay on a specialized medical bed, surrounded by both Vex and human doctors. Her pregnancy had progressed faster than either species expected, bringing them to this moment sooner than planned. It's time, Dr. Locke announced. The child is coming. Jack moved to Lyra's side, taking her hand. Her purple skin had taken on a silvery sheen in the final weeks of pregnancy, something the Vex doctors said happened only in the strongest royal births. Stay with me, she whispered, squeezing his hand with surprising strength. I'm not going anywhere, Jack promised. The birth happened quickly. Vex deliveries were typically faster and less painful than human ones, and this hybrid birth seemed to follow Vex patterns. A high-pitched cry filled the room, and Dr. Locke lifted a small, wriggling form. A daughter, he announced, his voice filled with wonder. The child was beautiful in her strangeness, skin a soft lavender color, with tiny ridges along her forehead like her mother's, but human-shaped eyes that blinked up at the bright lights. Her tiny hands had 5 fingers instead of the Vex 4. When she cried again, everyone could see she had human-like teeth already formed. "Extraordinary," whispered a human doctor. "Newborn humans don't have teeth, and Vex children don't have hair," added a Vex nurse, pointing to the fine silver fuzz covering the baby's head. Lyra reached out with trembling hands, and Dr. Lux placed the child in her arms. Jack leaned closer, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. "She's perfect," Lyra said softly. "The first of her kind." Jack gently touched his daughter's cheek. "What shall we name her?" Lyra looked up at him. "In Vex tradition, the mother names daughters and the father names sons. She is yours to name." Jack thought for a moment. "Hope," he said finally, "because that's what she brings to both our worlds." Minister K entered the room with an excited step. "Your Majesty, the crowds outside are enormous. People from both planets are gathering to hear the announcement." Lyra nodded. "Help me prepare. They should see their new princess today." An hour later, Jack stood beside Lyra on the palace balcony. She wore formal royal robes, but held baby Hope wrapped in a simple blanket. Below them stretched a sea of faces, blue Vex citizens mixed with humans in colorful clothes. The crowd fell silent as Lyra raised her hand. People of the Stellar Empire and honored guests from Earth, her voice carried easily across the square. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for all species. I present to you Princess Hope, daughter of Earth and Vex, living proof that our futures are stronger together." She lifted the child higher, and sunlight caught the baby's silvery hair. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by cheers that shook the palace walls. Later, in the privacy of the royal chambers, Jack and Lyra sat with representatives from 12 different planets. News of the successful hybrid birth had spread across the galaxy with impossible speed. "The Moran species has faced reproductive decline for 3 centuries, said a tall, gray-skinned ambassador. "If humans could help us as they've helped the Vex, the Krell would offer significant trade benefits for human genetic research," added another visitor. Jack listened to them all, then raised his hand for silence. "Earth does not seek payment for helping other species survive. What we ask instead is partnership, a new galactic alliance built on cooperation, not competition. The old ways of isolation have failed many of us," Lyra added, cradling Hope, who slept peacefully through the historic meeting. "This child represents what we can achieve together." As evening fell, the ambassadors departed with promises of further talks. Jack and Lyra stood alone on the private royal balcony, watching stars appear in the pink sky. "Did you ever imagine this?" Lyra asked, leaning against him. "When your ship first landed, did you think we'd end up here?" Jack smiled, putting his arm around her. "Never. I was just following orders, representing Earth. And now you represent much more." She looked down at their sleeping daughter. "You represent the future." In Hope's small face, both human and Vex features blended perfectly. Already scientists reported that her cells showed remarkable properties, healing faster than either parent species, adapting to different environments with ease. "The pure Vex movement is losing supporters daily," Lyra said. "Even Rex has requested a pardon and the chance to meet the princess." "People fear what they don't understand," Jack replied. "But hope makes it impossible to keep fearing." Below in the capital city, lights from human and Vex homes twinkled together as dusk deepened. Ships from distant worlds hovered in the atmosphere, waiting for permission to land and join the new alliance forming around the miracle child. "We should rest," Lyra said. "Tomorrow begins the work of building this new unified galaxy." Jack kissed her forehead gently, with Hope leading the way. In her sleep, the baby princess smiled, her tiny hand gripping one finger from each of her parents, a perfect bridge between worlds that had once seemed impossibly far apart.